All right, so get this. You sent us this podcast episode all about like how to master English faster. And, well, we're going deep into it just for you. It's a deep dive within a deep dive, kind of.
Uh-huh. I like that.
Right. This expert had some seriously interesting advice, so we're going to cut through all the fluff and give you the absolute best takeaways.
Awesome. I'm excited to dive in.
Okay, so the first thing that really caught my eye was this stat they dropped. Apparently, learners who fully immerse themselves in English can progress twice as fast. I mean, that's wild.
Yeah, that's a pretty compelling stat. Makes you want to dive right in, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
But then they went on to talk about some pretty unconventional immersion tactics, not just, the usual watch movies advice.
Right. They got into some really creative stuff.
Yeah, like switching your phone's language settings to English. It's something you don't even think about, but you're on your phone all the time.
Exactly. Imagine all those little bits of vocabulary and grammar just kind of seeping into your brain without even trying.
I know, right? It's like passive learning on autopilot.
Totally.
And then there was this other tip I thought was so clever, labeling everyday objects around your house in English.
Oh, yeah, I remember that one.
It's almost like turning your home into a giant vocabulary builder.
It's a really cool idea. I haven't tried it myself, but I can definitely see how it would be effective.
Totally. And speaking of unavoidable English, this expert is all about speaking practice, as much as possible.
Yeah, they were really big on that.
They even suggest talking to yourself. Now, I know that might sound a little crazy, but hear me out.
No, it actually makes a lot of sense.
Really?
Yeah, think about it. When you're talking to yourself, there's zero pressure.
Yeah.
You're not worried about making mistakes. You can just let the words flow and experiment with different phrases and no one's judging you.
Okay, that makes sense. That's like a safe space to just play with the language,
Exactly.
Did they give any specific examples of how to do this talking to yourself thing?
Yeah, they recommended describing your daily activities out loud in English. Things like I'm brushing my teeth or I'm making breakfast.
Okay, I can see that.
Simple stuff, but it gets you thinking and speaking in English, even if it's just to yourself.
I love that. It's so simple, yet so effective. Something I've always struggled with is vocabulary. I tend to get bogged down with trying to memorize endless lists of words.
Oh, tell me about it.
But this expert actually advised against rote memorization. They said it's all about learning vocabulary in context.
Yes, context is key.
They talked about connecting new words with vivid images or emotions to make them more memorable.
Right, because our brains are wired for stories and connections.
Yeah, it's so much more engaging than flashcards, right? It's like creating a little mental movie for each word.
Exactly. And that kind of multi-sensory learning, it really helps solidify things in your memory. The expert actually shared a story about how they learned the word melancholy.
Oh, I love a good learning story.
Right. So they associated this word with a specific piece of music that always made them feel kind of wistful. And years later, they could still recall the word instantly because of that emotional connection.
Wow, that's amazing. Okay, so we've talked about immersion and speaking practice, but here's where things get really interesting. The expert actually advocates for thinking in English.
Oh yeah, that's a big one.
Full disclosure, I tried this earlier and my brain felt like it was doing backflips.
I can imagine. It's definitely a challenge.
Yeah, for sure.
But the expert suggested starting small, like posing simple questions to yourself throughout the day. In English, of course.
Okay, so what kind of questions?
Well, just simple things like, what am I going to wear today? Or what am I looking forward to this week?
Okay, that seems a lot more doable than trying to narrate my entire life in English.
Exactly. It's about gradually shifting your internal dialogue, not forcing a complete overhaul overnight.
So it's like building a muscle, right?
That's a great analogy.
You start with lighter weights and gradually increase the intensity.
Exactly. It's about building that fluency muscle.
Now, confession time, I've always been terrible with grammar rules. They just, they make my head spin. So you can imagine my relief when this expert said that instead of getting lost in grammar textbooks, we should focus on learning common phrases and expressions.
Ah, yes, the power of phrases.
It's like a shortcut to sounding more fluent, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, native speakers use a ton of informal language, so mastering these phrases can make you sound way more natural.
Right. It's about sounding like you actually use the language, not just like you've studied it.
Yeah, and they have a great example using I have no idea instead of the more formal I do not know.
Oh, that's a good one.
Right. It's a small tweak, but it makes a big difference.
Totally. Those little nuances can really make you sound more like a native speaker.
This expert's all about practicality, which I love. Speaking of which, they also stress the importance of building consistent daily habits, like reading and listening to English content.
Oh yeah, consistency is key.
Right. And they didn't just say, read and listen. They got into this really interesting technique called shadowing.
Yes, shadowing. It's a powerful technique.
It involves, repeating what a native speaker is saying as you listen to them.
Exactly. It's like you're their shadow, mimicking their every word.
I've heard of it, but I've never actually tried it. Sounds pretty intense, though.
It can be, but it's super effective for, training your ear and your pronunciation.
So it's like a workout, but for your tongue.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The expert actually compared it to that.
Well, I'm all for a good language workout.
It's a fantastic way to pick up new vocabulary and phrases, too, all in context.
Okay, so now I want to talk about something I think a lot of people struggle with. The fear of making mistakes.
Oh, absolutely. It can be paralyzing.
But this expert, they flipped the script on mistakes, saying they're not something to be ashamed of, but rather valuable learning opportunities.
I love that.
Yeah. They even suggested keeping a mistake journal.
Oh, the mistake journal. That's a classic.
It's like shifting your perspective on making mistakes and seeing them as stepping stones rather than setbacks.
Exactly. It's all about embracing the learning process, mistakes and all.
Did they suggest how to actually use this journal?
Yeah. They said whenever you make a mistake, jot down the incorrect phrase and then write the correct version next to it.
Okay.
It's about actively acknowledging your errors and then reinforcing the correct usage.
I love that. It takes the sting out of making mistakes,
Yeah, it turns them into personalized little lessons.
Okay, so this next point is something I think we can both agree on. The power of setting clear, achievable goals.
Oh, absolutely. Can't emphasize that enough.
This expert, they really hammered home the importance of breaking down your language learning journey into manageable chunks.
Right. Because setting those big lofty goals, those can actually be demotivating.
I know, they can feel so overwhelming. It's
Yeah, like trying to climb Mount Everest without any training.
So
the expert suggested focusing on small specific goals, like maybe learning 5 new words each day.
We're having a 5-minute conversation in English.
Yeah, something like that.
And they said celebrating those small victories is crucial too.
Oh, for sure. It's all about acknowledging your progress and staying motivated.
Now, this last point might sound a little cheesy, but I actually think it's the most important takeaway.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
Having fun while you learn.
Yeah.
The expert actually called this their secret tip for mastering English.
Makes sense though, right? When you're enjoying something, you're more likely to stick with it.
Exactly. It's all about finding ways to make language learning feel less like a chore and more like, a game or a hobby.
Right. They talked about everything from playing word games to joining online English-speaking communities, even just exploring English language music, movies, TV shows, all that good stuff.
It's about finding those things that spark your interest and make you genuinely excited to engage with the language.
Because when you're having fun, learning becomes almost effortless.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here.
Mm-hmm.
Immersion, speaking practice, thinking in English, all that jazz. It's a whole toolkit for language learning success.
It is. And the best part is you can tailor these techniques to, fit your individual learning style.
Exactly. It's all about finding what works best for you.
So now what?
Well, now that we've got all this amazing info from the expert, we need to figure out how to put it into action. And that's exactly what we're going to do in the next part of our deep dive.
I'm ready when you are.
Okay, so we just threw a ton of English learning tips your way based on that podcast episode you wanted us to unpack. But knowing about these techniques is only half the battle, right?
Right. Knowing is one thing, but actually doing it.
Exactly. Now we need to figure out how to actually use them.
Yeah, exactly. Got to put it into practice.
So let's talk strategy. We know you're serious about mastering English.
For sure.
So let's make these techniques work for you out of all the stuff we talked about.
Immersion, speaking practice, the whole shebang.
Yeah, what really resonated with you? What are you most excited to try out?
Well, let's start with immersion. We talked about how powerful it can be.
Oh, yeah. Super powerful.
But it can also feel a bit overwhelming.
Totally.
Where do you even begin,
Yeah, for sure.
This expert had some really creative suggestions, though.
I know, right? Some of them are pretty out there.
Yeah, but in a good way.
I loved that tip about switching your phone's language settings to English.
Oh, yeah, that's an easy one.
Right. It's such a simple change, but it's like instant immersion.
Boom, right in your pocket.
I'm actually going to do that as soon as we're done recording.
Uh-huh, nice.
What about you?
Oh, I've already done that one.
Yeah.
I'm always looking for new ways to immerse myself, though.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
I mean, it's amazing how many opportunities there are to surround yourself with English.
It really is. Even something as simple as, like, changing the language on your streaming services.
Oh, that's a good one.
Right. You're already watching movies and TV shows.
Why not do it in English, you know?
Exactly. You're getting entertained and practicing your English at the same time.
Win-win.
Totally.
And remember that idea about labeling things around your house?
Oh, yeah, the Post-it note strategy.
Right. It might sound a little silly,
A little bit.
but it's a really effective way to learn new words.
For sure.
Every time you reach for the coffee maker, boom, vocabulary boost.
I think the key with immersion is to be intentional about it.
Yeah.
It's not just passively consuming English content. You know?
All right. You got to make an effort.
Exactly. It's about actively seeking out opportunities to interact with the language in your daily life.
Okay, so let's move on to speaking practice. We know you want to feel more confident speaking English.
Definitely. Who doesn't?
And this expert had some great advice on overcoming that fear of making mistakes.
Oh, yeah. That's a big one for a lot of people.
I mean, I know I get nervous sometimes.
Me too. It's totally natural.
But this expert, they really reframed mistakes as valuable learning opportunities.
Yeah, I loved that. It's not about avoiding mistakes. It's about embracing them.
Totally. Using them to improve.
Exactly. And I thought the mistakes journal idea was genius.
Oh yeah, the mistake journal.
So simple, yet so effective. I think a lot of learners get so hung up on being perfect
Oh yeah, for sure.
that they're like afraid to even open their mouths.
You gotta let go of that perfectionism.
Right. It's holding you back.
But I love the idea of actually writing down your mistakes. It makes you really look at them, you know?
Yeah, and figure out where you went wrong. And then when you write the correct version next to it, it reinforces it in your mind.
It's like turning oops moments into aha moments.
Aha, I love that.
And, I mean, the more you do it, the less scary those mistakes become.
For sure. It's all about building confidence.
Okay, so thinking in English, this is where things get really challenging.
Oh, yeah. This one's a brain twister.
But the expert insisted that it's like a game changer for fluency.
And I totally agree. I mean, if you're constantly translating back and forth in your head, it slows you down.
True.
It makes speaking feel less natural.
But how do you actually do it? It feels like such a mental leap.
It is. But remember, small steps. The expert suggested starting with simple self-talk throughout the day. Just ask yourself simple questions in English.
So, like, what kind of questions are we talking about?
Things like, what am I doing right now? Or what do I need to do next? Simple stuff.
I've been trying to do that, and honestly, it's hard.
Oh, I know. My brain keeps wanting to switch back to my native language.
Same. It's like a default setting.
But it's all about rewiring those thinking patterns. It takes time and effort.
Yeah, but the payoff is huge.
For sure. The more you practice, the easier it becomes to process information, formulate thoughts, all in English.
It's like building those neural pathways, right?
Exactly.
Creating a new highway for the English language in your brain.
I love that analogy.
Okay, so we've talked about immersion, speaking practice, thinking in English. But what about all that grammar stuff?
Ah, yes, grammar.
It can be a bit intimidating.
It can be. All those rules and exceptions.
But this expert had a really refreshing approach, I thought.
Yeah, I loved their take on grammar. It was very practical.
Right. Instead of getting bogged down in all the technicalities, they encouraged focusing on, like, learning common phrases and expressions.
Yes, because that's how native speakers actually use the language.
It's like a shortcut, you know?
Exactly. Like, remember that example they gave about, I have no idea?
Oh, yeah. Instead of, I do not know.
It's so much more natural.
Right. And it's so much easier than memorizing a bunch of grammar rules.
Totally. It's about focusing on what will actually make a difference in your conversations.
Practicality over perfection.
I love it.
Speaking of practical, I want to talk about shadowing.
Oh, yes, shadowing.
Sounds like an incredible way to improve pronunciation, listening, all that.
It really is. It's like having a pronunciation coach right there in your ear.
But it also sounds really challenging.
It can be, especially at first.
But remember, the expert had some tips. Starting with short audio clips, working your way up.
Right, breaking it down into manageable chunks. and focusing on one specific aspect of pronunciation at a time.
Right, so maybe one day you're working on intonation.
And the next day, it's all about rhythm.
Okay, I'm feeling a little more confident about trying it now. I think I'll try shadowing with one of my favorite podcasts.
Awesome. And remember, it's all about practice. The more you do it, the more natural it will feel.
Okay, now let's talk about recording yourself speaking English.
Oh yeah, the recording trick.
I know it can be a little cringy at first.
Oh, tell me about it.
But it's honestly one of the best ways to figure out your strengths and weaknesses.
For sure. You can listen back and be like, oh wow, I didn't realize I did that.
Exactly. It's like having a language coach in your pocket.
You can pinpoint those areas where you need to improve.
Yeah.
Maybe you stumble over certain words, or your intonation is a bit flat.
It's so much easier to catch those things when you can actually hear yourself.
Totally. And then you can really target those areas in your practice.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of techniques, but I think one of the most important things is to find a way to make language learning enjoyable.
Oh, absolutely. If you're not having fun, you're not going to stick with it.
And the expert had some great suggestions, right?
Oh yeah, tons of them.
Like what?
Well, they talked about games. You know, there are so many fun language learning apps out there now.
Oh yeah, those are great.
And websites too. They can help you practice vocab, grammar, pronunciation, all in a way that's actually fun.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like work.
Exactly. And don't forget about all the amazing English language media out there. Movies, TV shows, music, podcasts.
Endless entertainment.
It really is. It's like a giant playground for language learning.
I love that. So it's not just about hitting the books, you know?
No, it's about experiencing the language, having fun with it.
Making English a part of your life, not just a subject you study.
Now, I know we've covered a lot, but there's one more crucial aspect we need to talk about.
Oh yeah, I know what you're gonna say.
Setting goals.
We touched on it earlier.
But it's worth diving a little deeper.
For sure. I mean, goals are essential.
Without them, it's easy to get lost. You know, there's just so much information out there about language learning.
So many techniques, so many resources.
It's overwhelming. You need a roadmap.
It's like setting off on a journey with no destination in mind.
Exactly. You're just wandering around aimlessly. So how do we set effective goals?
Well, the experts stress being specific and realistic. Instead of saying, I want to be fluent in English, you know.
Right. It's too vague.
Break it down into smaller, more achievable milestones.
Exactly. So maybe your first goal is, I want to be able to hold a basic conversation for 5 minutes.
Right. Or I want to be able to read a simple English article without having to look up every word.
Exactly. And then once you achieve that goal, you set a new one.
It's all about creating a roadmap, like you said.
Right. A step-by-step guide to your language learning journey.
And they also said it's important to set a time frame. So instead of just, I want to be able to read a simple article, you say, I want to be able to do that within 3 months.
Oh, yeah, that's a good idea. Having a deadline gives you something to work towards.
That sense of urgency can really help keep you motivated.
For sure.
But also remember, it's okay to adjust your goals as you go.
Oh, yeah, totally. Life happens.
You know, sometimes you need to reevaluate things.
Exactly. Maybe your priorities change or you realize you need more time.
The important thing is to have a clear vision of where you want to go.
And to break down the journey into manageable steps.
I think that's a great place to pause for now.
Yeah, we've covered a lot today.
Immersion, speaking practice, thinking in English, goal setting, all that good stuff.
Phew, I'm exhausted. In a good way, of course.
Me too. But we're not done yet.
Oh, right. There's more.
In the final part of our deep dive, we're going to bring it all together. We're going to help you create a personalized action plan for mastering English.
Oh, that's going to be good.
So stay tuned. Okay, so we've explored a ton of techniques for mastering English faster, from like turning your house into a vocabulary playground to shadowing like a language ninja.
It's been quite the journey.
But before we wrap up this deep dive, let's, make this knowledge actually work for you.
Right. Got to put it all into action.
So let's imagine you were at like a language learning buffet. Okay.
I like where this is going.
You've got all these delicious options spread out in front of you. Immersion, speaking practice, thinking in English, learning vocab and context, shadowing, embracing mistakes, recording yourself, setting goals, finding joy in the process. It's a lot.
It is a pretty impressive spread.
But you get to choose what you want to put on your plate.
The best part.
So let's talk strategy. What are like some small actionable steps you can take, right now to start incorporating these techniques into your daily life?
Well, let's think back to that stat we talked about earlier. How learners who fully immerse themselves can progress twice as fast.
Yeah, that was pretty mind-blowing.
Right. So let's think about your daily routine. Where are there opportunities to create those little pockets of immersion?
Well, like we said, switching your phone's language settings. That's a super easy win.
Oh, for sure. And what about your computer or tablet?
Oh, yeah. Change the language on those too.
Exactly. While you're at it, think about your entertainment. Streaming services. Switch them to English.
Oh, and music. Listening to English songs is not only fun, but it's also a great way to pick up new vocabulary and get a feel for the rhythm of the language.
Absolutely. And what about reading? Do you have any favorite books or magazines?
Ooh, good point.
Maybe try finding some English versions.
You know, even just reading news headlines in English every day can make a difference.
It really can.
Exposes you to all sorts of new vocabulary and writing styles.
Exactly. It's all about making these small, consistent changes that over time really add up.
Okay, so let's say you've created these little pockets of immersion, right? Now, how do you actually get comfortable speaking English?
Well, remember the expert's advice about talking to yourself.
Oh, yeah. Sounded crazy at first, but it makes so much sense.
It does. Think about how much you talk to yourself in your native language.
All the time.
Now just try doing some of that in English.
Like what?
Well, remember, they suggested narrating your daily activities out loud.
Oh, right.
So next time you're getting ready in the morning, try saying things like, I'm brushing my teeth, or, I'm putting on my shoes in English.
It's like turning your everyday routines into little language practice sessions.
Exactly. And don't worry if you make mistakes.
Oh, yeah, the mistakes.
Remember, they're just stepping stones to fluency.
And if you really want to track your progress and learn from your mistakes, try keeping that mistake journal we talked about.
Oh, yeah, the mistake journal is your friend.
Every time you make a mistake, write it down, and then write the correct version next to it.
It's a simple but powerful technique.
Okay, so we've tackled immersion and speaking practice. Now let's talk about that ultimate brain twister, thinking in English.
This is where it gets really challenging.
I know, right? But so rewarding.
The expert said it's a game changer for fluency.
Yeah, but it can feel like you're trying to, teach an old dog new tricks.
I know what you mean. But remember, small steps.
Right, small steps, like asking yourself simple questions in English.
Throughout the day. Exactly.
Things like, what am I having for dinner tonight?
Or, what do I need to get done tomorrow?
Those little mental exercises can really start to shift your thinking.
They really can. It's like you're creating a whole new pathway in your brain for the English language.
Okay, so what about building vocabulary? I know a lot of people get stuck on that.
Yeah, remembering all those new words.
Well, this is where the experts' advice about learning in context comes in.
Context is everything.
They said rote memorization is basically a waste of time.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
It's so much more effective to learn new words by, connecting them to images, emotions, personal experiences.
Exactly. Think back to that story they shared about learning the word melancholy.
Oh, yeah. The music one.
Right. They associated the word with a specific piece of music.
And years later, they could still remember the word instantly because of that strong emotional connection.
It's amazing how our brains work like that.
It really is.
So instead of just memorizing lists of words, try to create little stories or mental images that connect to the meaning.
It's a much more engaging way to learn.
And don't forget to use those new words in conversation. That's the best way to really make them stick.
For sure.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground. But before we wrap up, I want to leave you with one final thought, and it might be the most important one of all.
Okay, I'm all ears.
Remember the expert's secret tip?
Oh, I think I do. Finding joy in the process.
Exactly. Learning English, or any language really, it can be challenging.
It can be.
But it should also be fun and rewarding.
It's an adventure.
So as you continue on your English learning journey, make sure you find those activities that, spark your interest and make you excited to engage with the language.
Whether it's watching movies or listening to music, reading books, playing games, whatever floats your boat.
Find those things that make you smile and want to keep coming back for more.
Because when you're enjoying the process, learning becomes effortless.
And that's the real secret, right?
To mastering English.
For any language. So there you have it. We've taken you on a deep dive into the world of mastering English.
We've explored all sorts of techniques and strategies.
And remember, this deep dive was sparked by your curiosity, your desire to unlock the secrets of this amazing language.
We tailored it just for you, based on that podcast episode you sent us.
So as you continue on your language learning adventure, remember, it's your journey. You get to choose your own path.
Experiment, have fun. Don't be afraid to try new things.
And if you discover any cool tips or tricks along the way, be sure to share them with us.
We're always eager to learn and grow alongside our listeners.
Until next time, happy learning!